the most important conscious decision and the biggest surprise that did and didn't work. So sometimes you make a decision, I think this is going to work, you do it, and it was the greatest decision you ever made. And sometimes you just say, this makes sense, but it becomes greatness. So if you could talk a little bit about the most important conscious decision you ever made, and I guess kind of the luckiest decision that ever happened to you.
Well, there was a kind of a natural evolution of my understanding of breeding from the time that I began with my first dog that was a Till's Tip bred dog in 1978, a combination Colby and Till's Tip. How it evolved from that into some very heavy snooty dogs that I acquired from Atlas Brewer. Actually bought his yard in the
What
early.
was that dog's name? The first dog you ever had?
Bogart. Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't find out what Tom Garner's very first dog was and what his name was.
Yeah, he got the name Bogart because as he was nursing with his litter mates, he would always find his way to the biggest tit full of milk. There was a time whenever they talked about if you had a group of guys sitting around smoking a joint, and there'd be one guy like just sucking on that thing more than everybody else, and they say, "Stop Bogarting that joint."
Yeah.
Somehow invoking the memory of Humphrey Bogart. For those who are of a different era, he was a famous actor along with Lauren Bacall back in the 40s, 50s. Yeah. But anyway, the fella that I bought him from, bought Bogart from, named him Bogart, and I kept the name, and that's what he explained. That's how he explained the name. But he was actually a deeply game dog, very, very high caliber dog. His father was Tip 3. Tip 3 was a grandson of Till's Tip, and he had the great misfortune of having been contested against Grand Champion Mike, who was the son of Grand Champion Art, and he met that highest of standards. Speaking of Tip 3, proved to be a dead game dog, and his son was as well, Bogart. Yeah, Bogart was on another yard when he was probably 5 or 6 years old, and on that yard was a son of Bogart, and the son of Bogart got loose, and the two of them got together and got into it, and they were found dead in hold. So that usually means you give them both credit for having been dead game. So unfortunately it turned out like that. He was a fine animal. Just a warning to all of us to mind the state of our chains and collars. If you have chains, here we don't. We have only pins. But anyway, moving forward from there, I acquired the snooty dogs from Brewer, and I liked the idea of breeding, close breeding, line breeding, inbreeding, in terms of reducing variability in the gene pool to make the outcomes of breedings more constant, more homogeneous. And so I tried a fair amount of line breeding within that bloodline, and it didn't work out well. And I thought, well, I'm just learning more about breeding in general, as far as I understood at that point.
I think this is a really important thing to understand.
Yeah.
Because you didn't just start out hitting a home run on your very first breeding.
No.
And I feel like there's a lot of pressure for people these days to hit a home run on their first breeding. And so whether it is or not, they kind of just posted up there that it's a fire, gas, and every other emoji you can put up on Facebook, when it's like, hey, like, you can learn how to do this just like everybody else does. So
Yeah. So anyway, we had a period of breeding heavy snooty dogs. I owned almost every noteworthy snooty dog that ever lived, including Spike. And the inbreeding and close line breeding that we tried to do to maintain the family, it just really didn't go anywhere. So then I added Chinaman to the mix. So I had Spike and Chinaman. And lo and behold, after about 2 years of breeding Chinaman, we were getting feedback that we were getting hellacious dogs whenever the dogs were bred closer. And not all of that was me doing it. You know, I'd send out a couple of pups off of Chinaman and somebody breed them together, and wow, it started popping at that point. So to kind of recap what had happened was I was getting my feet wet as a breeder, and I had tried some close line breeding and with the snooty dogs, and it didn't get me anywhere. So instead of rejecting close breeding snooty dogs, I was rejecting close breeding.
yeah,
So then
easy mistake to make, right? That whole like correlation and causation stuff, you got to be careful.
I was overgeneralizing. At that point, I didn't realize that the rules for breeding a bloodline don't apply to the whole breed. They only apply to a specific pocket of genes. So I started getting feedback that the tight-bred Chinaman dogs were really getting it done. They were Chinaman quality dogs. So I had to, try to sort that out in my mind, and the only thing to conclude, that information coupled with the fact that I was seeing other Eli bred dogs that were very high caliber dogs that were inbred like the Chinaman dogs do. The only thing to conclude logically was that the Eli blood inbreeds extremely well, and the desirable traits in the Eli dogs are controlled by recessive genes. And whenever you breed them, put it on both sides of the pedigree, then good things happen. So I reached a set of conclusions based on the snooty dogs, which actually turned out to be negative training, sent me in the wrong direction for understanding Eli dogs. But then I reasoned my way through that and properly concluded that the Eli blood likes inbreeding. In fact, it won't be anywhere near its potential unless you do breed it tight. Obviously, the genes that control the athleticism are unique to the Eli family, and they are recessive. So with that in mind, I started looking at other bloodlines, other characteristics, and reached the conclusion that the desirable traits in the Bolio line, intelligence and intensity, were controlled by dominant genes. When you inbreed that line, you get junk. When you outcross it, you get glorious intelligence and intensity.
But when you inbreed the Eli dogs, you get
greatness.
Right.
So that demanded a formula for blending the two lines together that honored the characteristics that I knew that honored the rules that I knew were applied to each one, so we could invoke the positive case for each bloodline and put them together, and then have a line of dogs that consistently were highly intelligent and physically superior. So what I'm saying is that based on the first 8 to 10 years of my breeding experience, that I was able to grasp and formulate some rules, and that gave me the challenge of creating a formula that would result in a stud dog that was truly superior. And that's how Frisco started, as the confluence, the coming together of rules about two preferred bloodlines, a way of making them the phenotype from bringing those bloodlines together, a way of making the phenotype possess the best of both bloodlines.
So you just said 8 to 10 years. So like it took you 8 to 10 years to figure it out, or like how long till you got a feeling of, oh, okay, I'm going in the right direction, and how long till you believed in what you were doing? Does that make sense, that question? How long were you feeling like, this isn't making sense, and oh, I get a feeling I'm going in the right direction, and okay, I know what we're doing now?
That was the roughly 8 years.
8 years?
Yeah, because it took that long to do these different generations of breedings and see outcomes. And of course, you can't reach a conclusion.
How many generations in 8 years do you think that you went through?
I went through a couple of generations with 2 to 3 generations of just breeding snooty dogs, and then a generation of crossing Chinaman back into the snooty, and then another generation for the original Chinaman dogs to get old enough to breed them together, or to breed Chinaman back to his daughters. So, we're looking at roughly 8 years. We figured 2 years per generation, four or 5 generations.
That's longer than a lot of people stick with it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I love a good challenge, and it was there just waiting to be deciphered. And so, the idea of Frisco existed well before Frisco existed, and then whenever the opportunity came to be able to manifest the ideas and the formula into the actual dog, and then to have several years to raise litters off of him, and then see just what percentages turned out to be truly exceptional dogs. It hit like a sledgehammer, because it was there, and it was doing it. We went from having 1 or 2 superior dogs in a litter to having way over half of some of our litters were just totally a cut above.
So Frisco is the most important kind of collection of conscious decisions, and then the biggest surprise that didn't work would have been inbreeding snooty dogs.
Well, it was certainly, it wasn't as much of an expectation as it was a hope when I started breeding them. The greatest disappointment in terms of having a positive expectation and then the outcome not reach the expectation was whenever I bred Chinaman to Jeep's sister Missy. That would be my greatest disappointment. The dogs had 0 prey drive. They were...
It's crazy because, like, on paper, you'd think, like, this is it. This is the one.
Well, Bully Son was bred to Miss Spike, if I remember correctly, and he was also bred to Miss Spike's daughter, Arts Missy. Bully Son to Arts Missy was one of the best breedings ever been done. Bully Son to Miss Spike was a total dud. To transpose this back to Maurice Carver's day. So Frisco to daughters of Missy, daughters of Snake and Missy, champion Hickory, champion Shaker, champion Asia, great dogs. But Chinaman back to Missy. There was only one that really got out there, and only one that you can find in pedigrees today, and she's called Crumb's Nubby. She should be Garner's Nubby. She was born without a tail. It's amazing how many of these dogs get their name changed. They want to just totally write you out of the picture. But anyway, at any rate, she ended up.
That's why you got to produce so many dogs.
I guess.
Because they're trying to write you out of the picture with so many of them.
Yeah, that's true.
For anybody that's wondering why we produce so many dogs.
Yeah. But Nubby ended up in the hands of Joe Chan, and she shows up in a number of the pedigrees that he's proud of, pedigrees for dogs that he's proud of, and so apparently she did contribute in her own way significantly in Joe Chan's hands. So he read more Jeep blood back into it. So that would be the breeding that disappointed, that I had the greatest expectations for, but just didn't pan out.
How about on the other side? The one that you might not have expected to be as great as it was.
Well, you have to go back into the context of the time and what my knowledge base was at the time. Most people don't know that I own the Pedro dog, mostly known as Snake Man's Pedro. That I owned him and bred him for 2 or 3 years. In fact, I produced most of the champions that he produced. But it was at that point that was pre-Chinaman, and I still hadn't figured out the parameters for breeding Eli dogs. And it was only late in his life that I started doing some inbreedings with him just to preserve his bloodlines, preserve his genetics, not expecting there to be truly high caliber athletes coming from it, because he really hadn't produced that many. He produced several good dogs. He produced I produced a dog named Beak with him that earned a title, and I produced a dog off of a double-bred daughter of Spike, Brewer's Lady Spike. I think that was her name, Brewer's Miss Spike. And got the Rojo dog, Champion Rojo, also known as California Fugitive. He apparently got confiscated in California, and was somebody took it upon themselves to liberate him from being in the hands of the authorities, and his name was changed to California Fugitive. So
the lengths a dog man will go to.
Yeah, and you got to have a sense of humor as you go through it.
Yeah.
But at any rate, with Pedro, I did a series of breedings towards the end of his life that were close breedings, double and triple breedings, and lo and behold, that's where the real bastards came from. They're really, really tough, physically superior animals, super hard mouth, super athletic dogs, and so that would be the most surprising series of breedings in terms of the outcome based on what I expected. But that was part of the process that allowed me to gain the understanding about the Eli blood. So whenever I saw that pattern, and then saw what happened whenever we had father, daughter, half brother, half sister off of Chinaman turning out the real deal, and then couple that with the information that the inbreeding from Pedro produced the real deal, then hello, the light bulb comes on and you embrace the principle.
So the formula is not just from like one thing that happened. It's for
It was a composite.
a series and like 10 years, a decade of seeing things start to come together.
Yeah.
So when someone's like, doesn't really matter what's in this pedigree, or this doesn't matter, or that doesn't matter, like all the things matter. They might not tell you for sure, but over a long period of time, you see the things that matter.
Yeah, you see the commonalities and the patterns that collectively paint a picture.